The only rule my employer gave me was deceptively simple. Do not look at the package. Just deliver this steel safe from Chicago to San Francisco. Get off on the rear platform when the train slows on the siding, and hand it to the man in the red cap. The money he offered was as astronomical as the rule was absurd. For that kind of money, I was ready to deliver the devil himself without asking questions. But he didn't warn me that there would be a ticking sound coming from it. Now, sitting in the semi-darkness of the baggage car of the Pacific Express, I was ready to give up half my fee to throw the damn thing off the tracks. But I couldn't. I am a professional. My name is Leo Vargas, and I'm the one you trust to deliver things you're better off not asking about. I've transported everything from diamonds warmed in bloody shootouts to documents that could start wars. But never before had a package spoken to me. Tick-tock, tick-tock. The sound was quiet but persistent, like a drop of water falling on the forehead of a condemned man. It seeped through the thick steel walls of the safe, which stood in the middle of the car, chained to the floor for high-value cargo. I tried to ignore it, buried in a worn-out detective novel, but the words blurred before my eyes, turning into a rhythmic pattern. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. The train picked up speed, and the monotonous clatter of the wheels merged with the ticking into some kind of hellish, dissonant orchestra. I closed my eyes, trying to breathe deeper. Just 40 hours, Vargas. Get a grip. Just sit here like a piece of furniture and it will be over. But the ticking didn't stop. Moreover, it was changing. At first it lagged behind the rhythm of the train, then it caught up, and after an hour, I realized with horror that both sounds had merged into perfect synchrony. Tick-tock matched clack-clack. It was no longer a coincidence. It was as if something inside the safe was listening to the world outside, adjusting, learning. I stood up and walked to the barred window. Outside, the outlines of unfamiliar towns, lonely farms, and endless fields rushed by in the darkness. America was asleep, and I was awake in a steel coffin on wheels, keeping company with a ticking Pandora's box. Do not look at the package, echoed in my head. But how can you not look at a thing that insistently knocks on your consciousness? It wasn't just a sound. There was flesh to it, a sensation of life. Sometimes I thought I heard something like a wet click between the ticks, a faint hiss as if some tiny mechanical creature were breathing. By midnight, I had stopped reading. I just sat and stared at the safe. The chain wrapped around it cast strange shadows from the single dim bulb under the ceiling. The shadows moved with the sway of the car, and I imagined they were moving on their own, like tentacles. I remembered the employer's face. A man in a perfectly pressed suit, with hands that had never known physical labor. His eyes were empty like a dead fish's. He didn't smile, he didn't frown. He just laid out the terms. What's inside? I asked then, breaking my own rule of not asking questions. Not your business, Mr. Vargas. Your business is to deliver it. Safe and sound. The integrity of the cargo is a matter of life and death. Literally. Now that phrase was taking on a new, sinister meaning. Suddenly, the ticking quickened. It broke away from the rhythm of the wheels and rattled like a crazy metronome before an exam. My own heart responded with a panicked staccato. I jumped up, pressing my palms to my ears. Useless. The sound didn't come from outside. It came from inside me, from the very core of my fear. It lasted for a minute, maybe two. Then the ticking just as abruptly returned to its previous synchronized rhythm, as if it were just testing its boundaries. Or my nerves, that was the breaking point. The rational part of my brain, the one that made me the best in my business, screamed for me to sit still and not move. But another part, ancient, animalistic, the part that fears the unknown more than a specific threat, had already taken over. I couldn't spend another 20 hours in this torture chamber. I needed to know. I had to see. I looked around. The car was packed with ordinary luggage, suitcases, crates, boxes. But in the corner next to the conductor's tools, I noticed a crowbar and a set of heavy wrenches. The decision came instantly, washing over me with an icy calm that replaced all the previous panic. Yes, it was a breach of contract. Yes, it could cost me my reputation and possibly my life. But living with this clicking worm in my brain was no longer an option. I took the crowbar. It was cold and heavy in my hand. As I approached the safe, I felt the ticking grow louder, as if anticipating the intrusion, or welcoming it. I inserted the end of the crowbar into the gap between the door and the body. The metal groaned. I put my whole weight into it. Nothing. The safe was built to last. Then I took the largest wrench and began methodically hitting the lock. The clang of metal on metal was deafening, drowning out the hateful tick-tock for a moment. I was covered in sweat, my muscles burning, but I didn't stop. With a crack that sounded louder than any gunshot, the lock gave way. The door bounced open a few inches. The ticking stopped. A deafening silence fell, more frightening than any sound. It lasted what felt like an eternity. I froze, listening. Only the clatter of the wheels and the whistle of wind in the cracks of the car were audible. Slowly, almost reverently, I swung the heavy door open. What I saw made my mind crack at the seams. I expected a bomb, money, stolen technology, even some occult artifacts, but this was alive. Inside the safe, suspended on thick tendon-like wires, pulsated something huge, fleshy, the color of dark cherry. It resembled a giant heart, but not a human one. Something more ancient, monstrous. Faint electrical discharges ran across its surface, and tiny gears and cylinders of brass and polished ebony were embedded into the very flesh. Mechanics fused with organics in a terrifying, blasphemous symbiosis. It was beating. Thump, 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 thump. Each beat coincided with the clatter of the wheels over the rail joints. The train was its rhythm, its life. The wires on which it hung led to a small screen embedded in the roof of the safe. Green numbers glowed on the screen, counting down the time to arrival. 14:27:15. 14 hours, 27 minutes, 15 seconds, and then it hit me. This wasn't a mechanism. This was someone's heart, magically, technologically, hellishly tied to the path of the Pacific Express. If the train slowed down, was delayed, stopped, the heart would stop. And with it, I was sure, would die whoever it belonged to. The integrity of the cargo is a matter of life and death. The employer hadn't been joking. I was overcome with a mixture of disgust and morbid curiosity. I reached out to touch the pulsating flesh, but immediately pulled my hand back. It was warm, almost hot. At that moment, the train, picking up speed on a straight section, swayed slightly. One of the gears on the heart's surface turned and the ticking resumed. But now it sounded different, louder, more confident, as if the creature knew its secret had been revealed. I slammed the safe door shut, unable to look at the abomination any longer. But hiding from the knowledge was no longer possible. I was no longer just a courier. I was a nursemaid for this. This thing, the keeper of its pulse. Someone's life now depended on me. I collapsed onto some crates, staring at the floor. What had I done? Now I knew, and that knowledge was an unbearable burden. Every stop, every traffic signal, every slow turn would be answered by a panicked fear in my own heart. I had to pray that the train ran on time. Hours passed. I didn't sleep. I sat and listened. The ticking was now no longer an abstract torture, but the sound of a working engine on which everything depended. I began to discern nuances in its rhythm. When the train went downhill, it quickened. On an incline, it became heavier with a slight strain. It was a living speedometer. Dawn found me in the same position. The light filtering through the dirty window brought no relief. It only illuminated the ugly reality of my situation. I glanced at the screen. 6:11:02. Less than 7 hours to go. We were racing through the Nevada deserts, the sun beginning to heat the metal skin of the car. Everything was going according to plan. It was at that moment that I saw him. At first, it was just a dot in the distance. A human figure sitting on the tracks. The engineer must have seen it too, because a piercing, long whistle sounded. But the figure didn't move. The train rushed on relentlessly. The distance closed at a terrifying speed. I pressed against the window bars, not believing my eyes. It wasn't just a person. He was tied, shackled to the rails. His arms and legs were spread out like a fly in a web. He was wearing a red cap. An icy wave of horror washed over me, constricting my throat. The man in the red cap. the one I was supposed to deliver the cargo to. He was expected. He had been set up. I rushed to the car door looking for the emergency brake cord. My hand reached for it and froze. If I pulled the cord, the train would stop abruptly. The heart in the safe would freeze. Whoever's life was tied to it would die. Who was it? A child, a woman? An innocent hostage? Or a powerful monster whose death would plunge the world into chaos? I didn't know, but I also saw the man on the rails. A living man who was facing an agonizing death. Time slowed down. The locomotive's whistle became a continuous roar of despair. I saw the man's face, his wide-open, terror-filled eyes. He was looking right at me, at my face pressed against the glass. He was shouting something, but his words were drowned by the roar of steel. The ticking behind my back was loud, clear, like a verdict. 5:59:48, by Fane 47. I was torn between two doors, one leading to the brake, the other to the safe with a beating heart. Save the stranger on the rails or the anonymous life linked to the cargo. Choose between the one you see and the one you know nothing about. It was torture. Every second counted. I screamed. Screamed from helplessness, from rage, from fear. But the roar of the wheels swallowed my cry too. The train did not slow down. I did not pull the brake. A few seconds before the impact, our eyes met. In his eyes I saw not just fear. I saw understanding. He knew I saw him, knew about the choice, and at the last moment his gaze held not a curse but pity. Then the inevitable happened. A dull, crushing thud. A slight tremor ran through the entire train. Something warm and sticky splattered on my window, staining it crimson. The train jerked, slowed for a moment, but then picked up speed again. The engineer must have realized that stopping would change nothing and only make the situation worse. I stood unable to move, staring at the bloody mess on the glass. A deafening silence rang in my ears, even though the train was still rumbling. A silence inside me, and then I turned to the safe. The ticking continued. Steady, confident. 5:58 on 11, but something had changed. The rhythm remained the same, but a new note had appeared in the sound itself. Swedish, triumphant, as if the heart was not just beating, but rejoicing. It had received what it wanted. A sacrifice. I walked over to the safe and swung the door open again. The pulsating organ now seemed larger, more saturated. The color had become more scarlet. The gears turned more smoothly. And on the small screen next to the countdown, a new line had appeared. A word spelled out in green pixels. Gratitude. I vomited. I sobbed, banged my head against the steel wall of the car, but I couldn't drown out that ticking. It was now a part of me. I had become an accomplice. I had made a choice. I had let a man be killed to preserve the life of this monster. The remaining hours of the journey became my personal hell. Every tick echoed in my soul with the memory of that impact. I saw his face, his red cap torn to shreds. When the train finally began to slow down approaching San Francisco, I looked like a ghost. I mechanically unhooked the safe and dragged it to the rear platform. The train stopped on a remote siding. I stepped onto the ground, barely able to stand. There was no one around, just the ocean wind and the cries of seagulls. I waited. Waited for the man in the red cap, knowing he would not come. His death was part of the ritual. The price for keeping that heart beating. But after a few minutes, the man in the perfect suit, my employer, stepped out from around the corner of the depot. His face was impassive. He was leading a little girl about 7 years old by the hand. She was pale with huge sad eyes. "Is the cargo intact?" he asked, not looking at me. I nodded silently, unable to utter a word. He walked over to the safe, opened the door a crack, and grunted in satisfaction. The girl timidly reached for the pulsating heart. "Daddy, is it pleased?" She whispered, "Yes, dear. It is pleased. Now you will live a long, long time." He turned to me and held out an envelope of money. I didn't take it.
What was that?
I exhaled. Who was that man on the tracks? The employer looked at me with his empty eyes. "The price, Mr. Vargas, just the price. Every beat requires energy. Every extension of life requires a sacrifice. You did your job. Forget this." He took the girl's hand and they walked away, rolling the safe behind them. I remained standing, listening as the ticking gradually faded into the distance until it was drowned out by the city noise. But I knew it would never fall silent for me. It would tick in my dreams, in moments of quiet. It would remind me of the price of my choice, that I had become a part of this mechanism of death and life extension. I did not forget. And I never will. Tick-tock, tick-tock, it is always with me, in the trunk of my car, in a dark corner of the room, in the depths of my own fear-filled heart. It is looking for a new victim, and I know that one day I will have to choose again.